Right. So we are super excited today to have Dr. Erin Carroll with us. Like for real, I use Dr. Fauci. So Erin is the distinguished professor of pediatrics and the chief health officer here at IU. He's also an associate dean for research and mentoring and the director of the Center for Pediatric and Adolescent Comparative Effectiveness Research here at the School of Medicine. And so he earned his bachelor's from Amherst College, his MD from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and a master's of science and health services from the University of Washington School of Public Health. He's the author of the Bad Food Bible. I need to pick that one up, Dr. Carroll. I don't have that one. And a co-author of 3 additional books on medical myths, as well as a contributing writer on health topics for the New York Times, The Atlantic, and The Upshot. He lives in Indy with his wife and his daughter that's in high school and has a son at IU Bloomington and another one at Purdue. He's a lifelong skier and a current walker. He plays more video games. I like that. Reads more comic books, watches more TV than you could likely imagine. I'm amazed that you even have time to do that. And he loves to build large Lego sets. I feel like I need pictures now. Cook impossibly complex meals, and then makes great cocktails. Now I need you to invite me over for cocktails. Super excited. So today he's going to talk with us about work-life balance. And I was super excited when his team told me that he could do that because I think that as grad students, sometimes there's this struggle of what needs to be the priority, what has to get done, what we want to get done, and then what our families kind of pull us in a different direction, especially if your family, if you're a first gen student, your family may or may not kind of understand what the toils are to getting a graduate degree. So it's certainly a challenge to kind of balance all of those things. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about balancing things. Then we're going to open up the floor for whatever questions you have. And this is specifically only open to grad students. So it's not like one of his regular Ask Erin sessions where staff and faculty were able to attend. It's specifically for you guys. So if you've got friends that you know have questions, go ahead and drop them the link so that they can come on and join us. All right, without further ado, Dr. Carroll.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all those nice things that you said. I genuinely appreciate it. It's honestly it's a pleasure to talk about work-life balance. This is something that has always been at the forefront of my mind and how I entered my career, and it's something that I probably spend more time talking about my junior faculty, what I talk with them about more than anything else. In fact, mentoring sessions, which I have with them, most of them weekly, I would say we spend much more time talking about these kinds of issues than really trying to advance their careers. It's always been front of mind. My dad was he was a thoracic surgeon who was triple boarded in critical care, ran a trauma unit, and he was not around a ton when I was a kid. And he worked very hard, and his choice, that's what it was. But even though I wanted to go to medical school, the one thing I can tell you right up front was I was never going to be a surgeon. That lifestyle was just not conducive to what I thought of being happy. Now, granted, even pediatrics, which is what I wound up in, turned out to be somewhat of a grind. But even when I was pushing through residency, I was shocked at how often the doctors that I worked with seemed to believe that your success was completely correlated with how miserable you were, that you had to sacrifice everything on the altar of professionalism and success. When it rapidly became clear to me that I could not be a good doctor if I was a terrible person. And if I was tired and cranky and depressed and sad and miserable, I could not be a good doctor. And I realized very quickly I had to find ways to take care of myself if I was going to be good professionally. This absolutely came into play when I took what was my first uh, real job, which was an assistant professor in 2003 here at the School of Medicine. When people would casually drop things like, "Oh yeah, you won't see your family," or if you really want to be successful, you're going to be working 7 days a week, and nobody recognizes off hours or anything else. I remember not to jump back, but I remember when I was in medical school, one of my friends was interviewing as a surgery residency, and I won't mention the school, but they bragged that their divorce rate was greater than 100% because some people got divorced twice. And I just remember being horrified. And this was like, no, they were proud of it. I have worked very hard to protect uh, my my outside of work life, as in conjunction with my work life, and I've made doing that for my other faculty a significant priority, because I believe that how successful you are at work is absolutely correlated with, how happy and how calm and how you're feeling about the rest of your life. And life can get pretty hard regardless, um, but it's super important to do things to protect yourself. A lot of people at IU have a hard time believing this, but I'm a really strong introvert. I joke all the time. I'm a professional extrovert, but I'm really at heart an introvert. The reason that I play a shockingly large number of video games and read comic books and do all those solo things is because I exhaust myself. I mean, just drain the tank in my day job, which is often being on and being around people and having to, I won't say perform, but be on in a way that is not, you know that is not easy for me. It is work. And so therefore, when the clock is over, when the day is done, I sometimes shut down, and my family understands this. My wife gets it. My wife is an extrovert, but she totally understands that, like, there are just nights I don't want to do anything. In fact, that's most. Doesn't mean I can't be around family or be part of the conversation, but like, I don't want to go out and have big dinners. I set pretty strict rules for myself about protecting my day-to-day life so that I can be in a place where I can be happy and perform in a variety of ways. uh, I don't like to eat in groups larger than 3 couples, and that includes like me and my wife. I don't like to go to tons of parties. I don't like to feel like that I'm on. I don't, necessarily do a ton of large group activities. But that's me, and that's just like, that is how I recharge. Other people are the opposite. My wife needs people to recharge, and so understanding and respecting those differences is super important. But beyond even yourself, I've always felt it's very important to protect the time that you have with family. When my kids were little, I believed in quantity time, not quality time. I would get involved in their activities. Luckily, lots of the stuff I'm interested in, which you rattled off, comic books and video games and TV and Legos, also happen to be in the Venn diagram overlap with things kids are interested in, which made it very easy um, for me to do that. But I always carved out time to try to be at a lot of those activities. And I encourage that with my junior faculty as well, in the sense that we focus on sort of outcomes. We know over a time period what we'd like to accomplish. And we work hard, therefore, not to micromanage the individual time. I don't necessarily care when someone is at their desk, or when things get done in the short term, or how, because everyone's schedule is different. We are much more focused on, this is where we need to be by this time. How you get that done in the interim is up to you. I know that that's a privilege. I know that that's not easy for everyone, but we work hard, at least in our group, that at least as I move up, I try to protect those in the umbrella below me, to try to make it so that those who work with and for me have that same kind of privilege. And I think it's important for us to protect that in each other. I know that the university, and I mean, all universities often fail at that. I know the world fails at that. I know that It is getting harder to, to make do with all that we have, I'm sorry, with what little sometimes we have, with all the strains that get put on us, and the difficulties that it can be just to pull everything along wherever you are. But we have to be honest and open about that, and we have to be willing to be flexible in the ways that we support each other, so that people can, thrive both at home and in their personal life at the same time they do at work. Because if you're only focusing on work, like I said at the beginning, you wind up not being a very happy human being. And it's hard for human beings who are not operating at their peak to be at their peak at their jobs. And so we have to care for each other. And we fail. I'm very open about this, but it's a terrible story. During the pandemic, I lost my father first in October, I think, of like 2020, and then my mother in uh, August of 2021, and then one of pretty much my best friend a couple months later in October of 2021. And then in October of that year, I had a panic attack and fell down a mountain. And I needed to be airlifted to a hospital where my wife lost her mind. And if you saw webinars that were like in October of 2021, you might have noticed I had either had stitches or scars. It was sort of a wake-up call that I needed to even do a better job of taking care of myself, because it's hard. You have to show up for work every day, and you got to keep, and especially I felt like in the job I was, it's put on a good face and support everyone around you. But I'm open about it. I thought, like, it was hard, and that was the time when I really started taking medication for anxiety, which has made a huge difference. But I'd been in therapy for 20 years since residency. And I think and this is all part of the whole, student mental health campaign too. We have to destigmatize a lot of the stuff that affects us. We have to be willing to be open and honest about how common and how pervasive so many of these issues are, how they affect all of us. Even the people that look like they've got it all together are often shouldering great loads and trying to hide exactly what's going on. And that doesn't help anyone. The world is hard. And right now it's really hard. And there's lots of stuff going on in everyone's life that people don't know about. And we have to be better about supporting each other, but even more so supporting ourselves. And I'm going to stop yapping, and I'm more than happy to take questions.
I have a question. So I don't remember where I saw this in like a blog or like a news article, but they're basically talking about like, how work-life balance is not a real thing because like your work is a part of your life. So trying to
Yep.
separate the two will also create more stress in your life as you're trying to balance something that is really just one. I don't know if that makes sense. So I guess that's my question of like, is there really a difference in like work-life balance as you're trying to figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually think of it as work-life balance as much as I do sort of my professional and personal life. In that, there's time, and my wife jokes about this all the time. There's work Aaron and home Aaron. And even when I've taken Myers-Briggs tests, I ask, like, do you want like work Aaron to answer this or home? We're very different people. Like work Aaron is like is like an ENTJ probably, and home Aaron is very much an INTJ, or at least much more of an I. But I don't think it's work and life, because I agree with you. Work is part of life. I love what I do. I won't even say that. I love what I do. It's like it is part of my life. I don't, look at it like, oh, this is part of my life and it'll be over someday and I will retire. I may do something different, but it is part of my life. But I need to balance the time that I spend and the person that I am and the responsibilities that I have at work with all of those things when I am not in. And I find that I need to make sometimes pretty clear dividing lines, because it's almost a different person and a different way that I care for myself. But that's me. Like other people, that they might not have that kind of dividing line, and that's fine too. But this is the way that I've learned to care for Aaron. That I, in order to keep everything, going okay, and for my psyche to be at peak form, I need to make sure that I have a balance in those two, parts of my life.
What other questions are out there? You can drop them in the chat if you need to, or unmute yourself.
Everyone's scared.
You know what? This group usually isn't, so let's just give them a few minutes.
That's fine. No problem at all.
Let them think a little bit. But I got a question too.
Sure.
So I'm thinking about, a little bit about the graduate student experience and just kind of how that's a different experience for a lot of people. And can you give us any advice on like just kind of keeping things together mentally with that, those different pieces that have to come together with schoolwork, with family, with folks that may be taking care of children, or folks that may be taking care of their parents.
Yep.
And just kind of holding it together and not letting everything fall.
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, a lot of it is unfortunately, you don't want to sound like you're giving fortune cookie advice. And I certainly never want to do that. It's hard. It can be really, really, really hard. It can be, much harder, at the stage of graduate student, because you're in sometimes that sort of bridge from one part of being a student into being a professional. And it can be a particularly vulnerable time because you're very dependent on your superiors in a way that you might not be later. Although, arguably you're sort of always at the, you're feeling as if you're at the whim of those who are above you in the pecking order. But as a graduate student, it's a lot of work to both get your degree and often to have professional responsibilities, to both be treated as someone, as a learner and as someone who's supposed to know everything about what they're doing. It's a stage in life where usually you might have a family or a young family, which can be particularly stressful. And at a time when parents can be aging or grandparents can be aging, and those things are stressful as well. You also don't happen to make a lot of money a lot of the time, especially for the number of hours that you work and the stresses that you have. And all of that, especially with family, comes at significant cost. And it's just incredibly stressful. And there's not much you can do about it. It's not like you can go in as a graduate student and say, I'm performing amazingly, give me a raise, because everything is pretty much obviously standardized. So it's hard. Like I don't want to minimize that. In my time as a graduate student and as a resident and a fellow, which felt like it was going to take forever, a lot of time it was always that this was a necessary step in order to get to the goals and places that I wanted to be. It is made particularly hard these days to be a graduate student because so many people's hopeful careers are getting even harder. I mean, if you truly want to be a sort of a tenure track professor in academics, it's getting much harder, especially with the number of graduate students out there and the economy the way it is and the way that education is often going, to achieve those goals. If your goals are other, that can still be very difficult. So it is hard. It's important to take care and to make sure that you manage your sort of expectations and where you hope to be and how everything is going. And also, I'd say not let professional trump everything else. There are many aspects of life that are very important and provide joy and meaning. And it's important to focus on all of those and not just any one. Now, jobs often try to teach you otherwise, that the only thing that matters is professional achievement, and it's easy for those who have been successful to say, oh, there are many other things that are important, but that is the truth. There are many other things which are important, and it's important to, and it's totally necessary to focus on all of them.
Awesome. That's great advice. Thank you so much. So we've got a question in the chat. Do you have a favorite formula to balance work times and break times? That could be over the course of a day or week or even longer.
Yeah, I mean, I try very hard to not work at night or on weekends and to really not. And I know that people say, well, that's impossible. And I'm like, I don't think it's impossible. I think learning to be efficient is as important as learning to be good. And learning how you can let work function as a sponge where it just takes up as much space as you will give it. And I have found that when I do that, I am no more successful than when I learn to say no. And that's hard. And you need the support, of course, of others around you to do so. But I'd say it's important to find mentors who will support you in those activities. So I don't take breaks in the middle of the day. And like, I'm not even one that schedules necessarily like lunch breaks, but I am a strong believer in that. Like, I get up, I usually will exercise or work out first thing in the morning, and then I'm off to work and I work. I really do. But when I'm done, I'm done. And, tonight I'm going to go to the IUPUI, I think women's basketball game. I might otherwise go to another basketball game. It just happens to be that season. But on Thursday, I'm probably going to get together with a friend and we're going to continue our Frosthaven campaign. And another night I would continue to play God of War Ragnarok. And I will, my comic books come every other week. I'm way behind. I got a stack of them. I will be reading that. Or watching TV with my wife, or hanging out with my daughter. Last night we played like an escape room video game. So I do those things. Like, people think I work 24/7. I swear to God, I do not. And the way that I remain upbeat, and I think I won't say professional, but I think like upbeat and able to do what I need to do is by caring for myself in those off times. Last night I made chicken stock. On top of, or no, chicken broth was last night, on top of whatever else I was doing. And I do stuff that's sometimes just me or solo, or I am a home, but I manage my personal time almost as rigorously as I do my work time. Sunday morning when my wife goes to work out and it's like quiet in the house, that's errand time. My dog will be on my lap. I'll be playing video games and having a good cup of coffee, and that could be the whole morning. And if I can stretch it into the afternoon, even better. But I'm protective of that. And so I'd say, like, the times when I'm not, professionally on, I am off.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I thought something you kind of touched on, and something that we try to reiterate a lot, is the concept of self-care and what that looks like. And I don't always know that we as faculty members are great at modeling self-care or letting people know that, yeah, we do take care of ourselves too. Yeah. Because you might get an email from me at midnight, or yeah. My GA is looking at me like, Dr. Hardy, I do. So but you're not going to get one from me Friday night, because I take the Friday nights off, and that's how I feel about life. I'm taking Friday nights off. Most days I take Saturday off too, and then you might see me again Sunday evening, maybe. But I try to keep those like weekends to myself. I also wanted to share that I do take breaks in the middle of the day, and there are some great like meditation apps that can help with that. I'm gonna drop one of them in the chat. But the other thing that I do that my coworkers will tell you they have seen the remnants of is I have bubbles by my desk. Like I really do, like no joke. I have bubbles by my desk. And sometimes when I'm on those phone calls that make me a little more agitated than other times, I will start to blow bubbles. And I dare you to have an attitude and have your mouth in a weird, like angry face and blow bubbles at the same time. It is not possible. So you cannot make the angry face and blow bubbles. So I would suggest, like, if you have that option, or you want to, also share in my bubble blowing experiment, I say go for it.
And and that's important. I think it's also important to recognize, like, we all do different things in our own way, and that's great. like it's, what calms me or makes me like Legos, I find are like meditation. I'm in the zone. I'm following instructions. I'm not worrying about everything else going on. Great. Other people, it's a nightmare. And I totally get that too. I was thinking about your email in the middle of the night. Like there are times when inspiration comes to me and I will send out an email at night, but I'm very careful to tell everyone I work with, like, there's no expectation that that's when you should answer it. That's just when, like, I hope if I could find a way to batch it and you wouldn't receive it till the next day, that's fine. But I do have to make sure that people know that, especially if I'm in a position, perhaps with more power than they do, or at least even perceived, that they understand there is no expectation. And I have to be serious, honest about that. Like I have to convince them. It can't be just saying that, but then get upset when they don't do it. There's no passive aggressive. But I work very hard to try to get my junior faculty and others that I work with and that I mentor to be honest and open about that, and to let stuff go, and to be protective of their time. And I know that means that they have to be protected, and I have to be willing to, protect them when others might try to make them work on off hours. But I try very as hard as possible to create a world where off means off. And then there's every expectation that there is downtime.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Charisma, you got another question?
I did have a question. Beyond the fact that I don't play video games, I like to watch people play video games because I'm not really good at it. But I am watching someone play God of War Ragnarok, and
best game. I mean, honestly, I think the best game I've ever played, ever.
It's really nice.
Like a baby at the end of it. It was amazing.
That wasn't my question, but I love this. But I feel like one of the things that's like stressing me out as a grad student is like I'm getting close to being done with grad school. And me and my mom talked about it recently, where she pointed out, because I went from undergrad straight into grad school. So she's like, oh, you've been doing grad school since you were 3 years old. And so now I'm like, oh my God, here I am. I'm about to be like an adult and like not have the identity of a student anymore. It's like, what does that mean for myself? So like doing that little spiral of like, who is Charisma without 11:59 deadline for homework, or without a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, a professor or a teacher to report to? So do you have like any suggestions on like that adjustment of like losing that identity?
Well, I mean, I finished the 25th grade before I got my first job. And so I feel you. And it's like, and I get it. It's this, I will say, it's like you think there'll be a transition, and it's not nearly as much as you think, because I think you find that even no matter what step you take, it's just a new stage and a new, pecking order and a new ladder to climb. And so in one respect, I'd say that it's, that it's not as much of a dichotomous transition as you might think. But if there is one, I get it. It's like finally finishing school. I'd embrace it. I mean, I think that you're ready. There's no one who finishes graduate school who's not ready. I mean, you've been in school forever. You've learned, hopefully, all the things you need to do. And to be honest with you, you get to a point where until you set foot into the actual job, whatever it is, or I don't want to say the real world, because it's all the real world, you realize that half of, a good education is learning how to teach yourself, because it won't stop. Like the things that I do now, I did not dream about 5 years ago. And I could say that at any point of my career, that I had no idea what I would be doing in 5 years. And so I've constantly had to teach myself new skills, or work with others to give myself new skills. And so that will continue. But we keep, I feel sometimes like, we keep people in the box too long. That graduate school, it can almost get addicted to being inside. You need to get out there. It's time. I'm sure you're ready. And I'm sure you're going to be great. But you won't stop learning, and you won't stop developing. And the people I think who are the most successful and the most happy over time are the ones who continue to grow and keep going. And so it'll be modeling the behaviors you've learned as a professional student, to just make that part of your life as you keep going. But don't fear it. I'm like, I'd celebrate it, own it, celebrate it, be excited about moving forward and the fact that there's, tons of opportunities and new things that you'll get to do.
Yeah, definitely celebrate your wins. So there's another question in the chat. Do you have any advice on how to identify and deal with difficult coworkers?
So part of it, I think, is it fascinates me how much time we spend learning so many details about so many things, and we spend so little time, most people, being educated on sort of like human dynamics and leadership, for that matter, but also sort of like, being a coworker and how do you get along with others. There's some really great books out there on management and on leadership that can also be very insightful in learning to deal with others. Part of it is that I think we force people into jobs which they are not happy with or not suitable for. Not everyone is suitable for every kind of job. Like I said before, I'm an introvert. If you told me that it's like my job was going to be like professional party planner, I would run screaming. It's not, I don't want to do it. And it's like, if I was forced into a role where I'd be a difficult coworker. I just would, because it's like, if you constantly were like, we need someone to go out and like, glad hand all the people, I'd be like, ugh, that's a lot of work for me. Other people would love that. I think sometimes it's trying to figure out what is making them a difficult coworker. What is, the barrier to them being the best that they can be? Is it that they're being asked to do tasks for which they're not terribly well suited? Is it that that something is wrong in their outside of work life that perhaps is bleeding to inside their work life? Is it that they just have a personality which is different than everyone else's, and therefore makes it harder for them to feel like they're getting along? It depends what it is. Now, of course, some small percentage of people are just not pleasant. Hopefully they're very, very rare. I have found those people to be very, very, very rare. Most people who just are unhappy at work are unhappy for a reason, whether it be the work environment, or the actual job is not well suited to them, or something is wrong, period. And a good boss or a good manager tries to figure out which of those things it is and then work on it. Obviously, you can't fix everything, but sometimes helping people to realize that maybe they'd be much happier in a different job is important. Rarely I will be, coaching a mentee or a faculty member, and I'll be like, I love IU. I truly do. I've been here for 20 years, and but I say all the time, like, that's because it's working for me. There are times when I'm like, I think you need to go look for another job, and it's not because a failure on you. It's just, this is not a good fit for this environment. It's not a good fit for you, and I think in another environment you could fly. And then it's my job to help you find that new environment, and I don't see that as a failure. The vast majority of people do great where they are, but some people do not. And trying to work to figure that out and solve the problem will often make everything better, because too often we think we just need to box those people in or figure out just ways to either just ignore it or do anything, and it winds up leaking into everything else that we do. So if it is just a flat out coworker, it can be difficult, but sometimes talking to every direct report and trying to find ways to work through whatever issues are, I think that's far more productive than ignoring it.
Other questions and concerns? Dr. Carroll, what advice do you have for, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nina.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Dr. Hardy. Thank you, Dr. Carroll, for your vulnerability and for sharing. I'm a PhD student, and sometimes I think not many people, I wish more people were like Dr. Hardy, but a lot of people look at me as a robot and that I should be producing and working and doing all the things that come along with our PhD duties. But a lot of times they think it's hard for, you were talking about like kind of like the work-life balance of like separating home life from work life. And a lot of times that's very blurred in academic settings. Can you give an example of some like boundaries that you set with yourself and or your coworkers for like honoring your health and time like outside of work?
How much time you got? Give you a list a mile long. I mean, I remember even when I was a medical student, like I love to read, as you can see. And I used to carry like, whatever book I was reading around in my pocket. And the doctors I was working with would get angry at me if they saw me reading because I wasn't working. And I'd be like, I did the work. What else do you want me to, like, I've done everything you asked me to do. Now I'm gonna read. And then it bothered them and it didn't bother me. And I get, because again, it's like it's burning everything on the professional altar. But I remember once I was in Disney World and I got an email from a high up superior. It was like, I need some blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'd love to help you. I'm in the Magic Kingdom. I can't. And they were like, how, I was like, I'll try to get to it tonight, which I would never do today, but I was very junior then. And they were like, well, if you can answer me now, why can't you? And I'm like, cause I'm like answering you on a phone. And I'm like, and I'd later. So now I wouldn't have ignored the email. I'd put the office reply and I wouldn't feel bad about it. And I have to say that most of the people I've worked with get that eventually. Other things, I used to set Wednesday as my writing day. No one could schedule an appointment with me on a Wednesday. Like that would be the day I'd get my writing done and everything that I needed to do. Like everything got batched to Wednesday. That was my professional day. That irked some of my superiors and coworkers, but like I would answer with like, this is how I remain as productive as I am. And eventually they would get it. Other things I'm pretty careful about saying no to late night meetings and certainly weekend meetings, and early morning meetings unless they are really important. It can't be done anywhere else. I've been more permissive about that as my kids have gotten older, because I don't really care as much anymore. When my kids were young, I was super protective at that time. My daughter's barely home right now as it is, so my wife doesn't care if I hop on a call every once in a while. But with my kids, it was really important to me to separate that time. I would also I'd work the required number of hours and get the work done, but I did not always stick to the 9 to 5 schedule. I would drop my kids off at school on the way to work, which meant I might arrive a little late. If I had to pick them up, or if I wanted to leave to have dinner, I might leave a little earlier than other people, and then I might work a few hours after the kids went to bed. And I was always very sort of clear and open about that, in that I tried to get people to focus on what I was doing and the outcomes of my work rather than the process, which works over time. But it can be difficult to do. But again, I support all the people that work with and that I mentor in doing all of those things. It's not like this was good for me, but I'm gonna. It's you got to pay it forward. We have to create a new culture and be sort of open about this. I have benefited from the fact that I'm a pediatrician and I work with, most of my career was spent with a lot of other pediatricians, all of whom get the importance of kids and family. So it's maybe that made it a bit easier, but we've tried very hard to, make that. Even as I've gotten outside of pediatrics, I'm still very focused in I don't micromanage people's hours. I don't micromanage how they spend their days or weekends. There's work that needs to get done that we all need to work on together, and we are totally open to the fact that some people have great weeks and bad weeks, and that you got to be respectful and caring about all of those things. I have many more examples, but I don't want to just keep rattling them off. But I think a lot of this we have to create a new culture, together. We have to be willing to be honest about what it takes to be happy and what it takes to be a good human being, which is a necessary component of being a good professional.
Yeah, that's great advice. So I have a question that's in the chat. You mentioned trying to be more efficient during work hours. Do you have any examples of strategies that help you be more efficient?
Yep. So before COVID, and when I had another job where I was in my same office every day, I literally would keep a to-do list on I called it my blackboard because it wasn't a whiteboard. It was actually, I had a funky one that was black and you'd write on it with colors. But the to-do list was always things that needed to get done that week. I do not put anything on the board that's like, this is due in 3 months. This is due in, 6 months. I'm very much focused on the tasks that must be accomplished now and in the immediate future so that I can remain, moving along. I find it's too easy to put things on in your mental or physical to-do list that are weeks or months away. And then you just keep pushing them off, or you're like, oh, just there's some, yes, in order to get something done in 3 months, I would batch up what needed to get done each week and then focus on the very short term. And then if I finish the list, well, I could have an easier week or I could get started on other things. But I'm very much, and I do this with my faculty as well, of like, what do we need to get done this week and how can I help you do that? What are the issues you're facing right now and how can I help you overcome them? As opposed to, really getting stuck in the weeds of the long term. I will also say that a lot of this is practice. So the story I tell all the time is, and this is absolutely, I swear to true, people don't believe me. When I got promoted with tenure, I think it was like 2008, I had this epiphany that really so much of my job was being a writer. And I had never trained to be a writer. Like I'd taken classes in college that were tests, not papers. I avoided writing like the plague. English was always my worst subject. But I wrote, my job was being a writer. I wrote grants, I wrote papers, I wrote talks, I wrote, email, like that's what I did. And so I was like, the only way I'm going to get good at this is by practicing. And so I made this commitment to myself that I'm going to write 800 words a day, every day for 2 years until I get very good at it. Because if I do that, I'll eventually, writing 800 words won't be such a big deal. So I started writing a blog. This was like the golden age of blogging, the 2008-ish time. And I wrote about health policy. And to make a long story short, it took off. And it's like, and I joined up with another guy, and then that led, to the blog getting bigger and bigger. And after doing that for like 4 years, I started to write for like CNN.com. And eventually I wrote for the New York Times. That was like all practice and volume. I swear to God, I was not born with this. It's like I dedicated myself to forcing myself to learn a skill. And eventually I became pretty good at writing 800 words. I'm not going to write a novel. I don't know how to do it, but I'm decent at writing 800 words. I've gotten good at writing papers. I understand the structure of how like a peer-reviewed paper works, and I can describe it to mentees very clearly. But it's very like a component. You put it together. I know how to write a grant. I know the components to go together. I've gotten better at it over time. I have worked hard to sort of learn time management and how I organize my day to get better about it. I read. Like I have to drive up and back to Bloomington. I have to drive down and back. I listen to lots of books on tape on management, on leadership, on how to be more successful in a variety of different mundane areas, because I recognize I got to keep learning, and I find that to be enormously helpful. But and over time, it's getting better and better at the skills that are necessary in order to succeed at this. Part of it is like you have to also focus as much on your work process as you do your outcome. You have to get very good at knowing what is working for you and what is not, and finding mentors or coaches who can help you do that so that you continue to get better. Somebody, you were asking before about leaving grad school. The one great part about grad school and about school in general is there's a whole network of people whose job theoretically is to help you develop and help you get better at what you do. Too often we leave and we go out into the workplace and that kind of relationship ends. One of my job is I'm associate dean for research mentoring in the School of Medicine. And I built helped build a lot of the major mentorship programs because I'm really passionate about this, that we need, mentors and coaches at every single stage of your career, all the way up to keep you developing and getting better. But it's super important to get better at the process of your job as it also is the outcome, so that you can do it more easily over time.
Thanks so much. Wow. Such a wealth of great knowledge you're giving us today, Dr. Carroll. We appreciate it. So yeah, another question that is in the chat. How did you find the opportunity to write in the New York Times?
The short answer is no shame, but the long answer is, we had that blog and we got really good at writing 800 words a day, and people started to come to the blog because they recognized that we were, a calm, evidence-based discussion of health policy. When we didn't really have a political agenda, we didn't really have a goal. I've always said, like, I just want a better healthcare system. I don't care how we get there. I can give you private ways to get there. I can give you public ways to get there, lots of ways to get there. Let's talk about the evidence and what we want. And then I started to write, after doing that for a long time, one-offs. Organizations would offer us one-off pieces. Like Bloomberg would say, would you write an op-ed on this? Or CNN.com asked me to write a bunch of op-eds. And so I wrote reasonably regularly for CNN.com for a while. And then there was this sea change in the blogosphere in 2013-14. Ezra Klein left Wonk blog and formed Vox, and Nate Silver left the New York Times to start 538.com, and Wonk blog was picking itself up, and the New York Times, and like, we need a data vertical. And so their model was they had a small number of journalists, but they were going to get a bunch of academics to write regularly on topics of their focus. So like Justin Wolfers was, say, Tuesday on economics, and Michael Beschloss was Wednesday on history, and Brendan Nyan was Friday on political science. And I talked to my writing partner. I said, hey, I wonder if they have anyone to write on health policy. We should ask. And he laughed and forbade. He was like, we're not doing that. We'll get laughed out of the room. And we argued for a while, but I have no shame. So I cold emailed David Leonhardt, who was the editor at the time, and I said, do you have anyone to write health policy? And he was like, no, would you like to do that? And I was like, yes. And so we got assigned Monday, Austin and I. Austin's my writing partner at the blog, but they made us switch off. So like, we'd write every other week on Monday about health policy, and we were annoyed because everyone else got to do it weekly, and we had to do it every other weekly. But within like 2 or 3 months, the rest of them were gone, because writing 800 words a week was like soul crushing for them. But as I said before, like, we've been training ourselves to write 800 words a day for years. And asking me to write 800 words every other week was like training to run a marathon and then being asked to walk the track. Like, I could do that. So we stuck around for years. I wrote, pretty regularly for the Upshot for seven years, maybe like 2-3 times a month. And then I switched over to Opinion during the pandemic. I would write more, but they just don't let you. And so it's, or unless you want to become a journalist, and I don't want to become a journalist. But again, it was like it was a right place, right time, right skills kind of thing, where, really I'd been training myself to write 800 words pretty easily. And then when the opportunity arose, not having any shame and being like, can I do it? And then just continuing to show up.
That's awesome. So I'm probably going to drop a few tips or items in the chat so that you guys can keep up with some of the things that we got going on this Thursday. We will continue our grant writing series with Grant Writing 101. And Nate is going to talk a little bit about the writing process so that you guys can get this money, right? And to get the grants that you need in order to conduct the research that you want to do. And Dr. Carroll mentioned mentoring, so be on the lookout for some announcements from our Graduate Mentoring Center in March. We're going to bring in our trailblazers and innovators, presenter, speaker, and that'll be a couple of days of great workshops and presentations that you guys can sit in on, and I think there'll be free food, free pizza for that as well. So excited about that, and the speaker is really awesome. So she's great. So be on the lookout for that as well, and definitely follow us on all of our social media. Dr. Carroll, is there social media that we can follow you on?
I'm on Twitter at Aaron E. Carroll, but not as much as I used to be. I have our YouTube show is worth watching. It's called Healthcare Triage, and we have a podcast as well. But that's where I would send people. Healthcare Triage.
Awesome, very cool. And Ocho Social coming soon. Nice. I love it. Sounds great to me. Here for it. And I think we talked to Teresa and Catherine also about having a presence from Ocho during Grad Appreciation Week.
Absolutely.
So we're super excited about that and having you guys join us for Grad Student Appreciation Week.
Sure.
Is there anyone with a last minute burning question? I might have one, but it's really about COVID, Dr. Carroll.
Sure.
And about, I've got a coworker with COVID now. Her son gave it to her. So what do you see as COVID precautions and what we need to be doing moving forward?
I think we just, well, one is like stay up to date in your vaccination. I mean, that is the single best thing you can do. It won't necessarily prevent every case of COVID, but it will prevent many, many cases of COVID resulting in bad outcomes. I am still struck by, I saw earlier this week, they're still continuing to track, let's say, deaths because it's the worst outcome. And even now, with the fact that probably everybody has had COVID, those who are unvaccinated have significantly higher death rate than those who are vaccinated and boosted. It's a no-brainer. And so I would, continue to do that. We're not going to get rid of COVID. It's not going to happen. But we need COVID to get to the point where, as long as people stay up on their vaccines, it's no more dangerous than other seasonal viruses like flu. I wish we were more serious about flu, but we're not going to get to zero. So the best thing still we can do is stay away from each other when you're sick. If you are sick, stay home. Don't go to school. Don't expect others to show up for work or school if they are sick. Stay up to date on your vaccinations, and just for not so much as COVID, but lots of things. Good hand washing, especially before and after you eat or before you eat. And continuing to just be thoughtful about, where you are and where the risks are. But I really can't stress enough vaccination.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Carroll. We just want to give you a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. For those of you who are in the meeting, we will post the recording to our graduate office YouTube page, so you can access it there, share it with your friends, and have them access it as well. Thank you guys so much. And thanks, Dr. Carroll, for joining us and presenting to us today. We really appreciate it.
Anytime.
It's been a great hour.
Great. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. Have a great day.